Well, hello, Callaway County. This is absolutely incredible. I just want to say thank you to the Callaway County Democratic Club, Bryant, Gracia. Our thoughts are with Lee. I am so grateful to be back here, and wow. So I appreciate you all coming out today. I want to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about my campaign, and what we're going to do to make sure that Missouri's 3rd congressional district is represented by the best man for the job, a Democrat. So I grew up out in Forestell. I started my career as I'm a chemist, I'm a mom, I'm a military daughter and granddaughter. And I started running because what's happening in politics right now isn't just politics, it's personal. I started my career at the EPA lab testing environmental samples for contaminants dumped into our water by big corporate polluters. And I spent the first 10 years of my career in agriculture, helping farmers and producers test their soybeans and their corn and other commodities. In the past 8 or so years, I've been working more on the industrial side, and I work as an essential first responder in energy infrastructure. So sometimes I'll get really important calls from Steedman over there, our Callaway nuke plant. I'll work in water and sometimes in refineries to help them solve chemistry problems that they didn't know that they had. So I've been blessed to be able to do that. So I've got the experience and qualification to serve in Congress in this role and to make a big difference for our farmers here and to help bring down energy costs for our families here at home. What's happening right now in politics, it's not just politics, it's personal. With this big bill that Congress just passed, we're seeing devastating cuts to programs like Medicare and Social Security and Missouri Health Net. We're seeing unconstitutional cuts in USAID aid that's going that's going overseas, where we have soybeans that are rotting on barges right now because our president and the people who enable him are blocking congressionally funded aid to places where it needs to go, and it's impacting our farmers here at home. I was really influenced growing up by my grandfather and my grandmother on my mom's side. My grandfather served in General Patton's army. He was a gunner in the Thundering Herd. He served in the European stage, and his unit was one of the units that rolled up onto a camp that they thought had been deserted. And it turns out not only were there prisoners being held there, but it turned out to be one of the greatest intelligence finds in history because of the caves and the technology and the experiments that they found when they rolled up onto those grounds. And his story stuck with me. I was a grandpa's girl, so I would wake up 3 o'clock in the morning and help him deliver papers north at Danville in rural Illinois. And so as we were driving around, he would tell me all of these stories that about his old grizzled war stories. And he would always say, I hope I'm not traumatizing you, when he'd tell me about his friends getting blown to bits and what it was like to be like a poor farm kid in a boat, headed out, not knowing what you're going into, not knowing what you hope that your training is sufficient. But he's talking about what it was like to fight and to lose and to win, and what it meant to come back here and rebuild his life after that. Now, after he would tell me those stories, and those stories always ended with a trip to the barber shop to see his buddies, and then to the diner to have breakfast with all of his buddies. And they let. I was the nerdy homeschool kid who liked to talk about dinosaurs, so I'm sure I was entertaining. But when I'd get home to my grandma, she was smoking in the kitchen. She'd bring me into the kitchen, and she would remind me that it wasn't just men who gave their lives to preserve and protect our freedoms, that women died as well too. And so she told me stories from her side of things, because she was a machinist, the real Rosie the Riveter type. When I knew her, she was helping build refrigerators, Back then, they were building engine propellers and whatever mechanical things they needed for the boys overseas. And so she taught me the power of community, what it meant to be a woman who was serving along with your husband who was overseas, what it meant to come together as a community, to ration out butter, to have birthday parties together in the community because resources were tight. She talked to me about what it meant to be there for your community, and she taught me about tying that yellow ribbon around your old oak tree and hope that your loved one would come home safely from war, and that what your community needed to do for those families who had that yellow ribbon wrapped around that tree, but their loved one didn't come home. And so she shared about that sacrifice. She also told me that our freedoms weren't guaranteed. And one specific one she would talk about is the right and our freedom to vote, that it was not guaranteed. And so she told me stories that are very relatable now to me about these small groups of women who would meet in the basement of a church or in a community center or in somebody's living room. They meet in private and they would talk about how they're going to ensure and protect their right to vote. And so she always told me that there are always going to be evil men who are going to try to take away your right to vote. They do not want you to have the voice. And she says there are always going to be weak men who are going to let them. And it is always going to come up to the women in the community to stand firm and protect our rights because they matter too. And she told me about her friends who would come to the meeting, and it wasn't always popular for these women to go to the meetings. How she had a friend who would show up with bruises and a broken arm. And one time her friend came to their meeting with a broken jaw. And then she took a drag of her cigarette and said, and then he went out for milk and he never came back again. Maybe he got lost in a cornfield somewhere. I was like, whoa, Grandma. But I'm reminded of those meetings when I come out here and meet with all of you because I know what it's like to rebuild here at home when it seems like hope is lost. And that's what I've been doing since 2022. I started running for Congress in the Missouri's 3rd Congressional, right here.
Right, you started right here.
And I started right here. Thank you, Brian. Yes, that's absolutely right here where we stand. I started in 2022, and it was right after COVID. COVID had wiped out our democratic infrastructure, as well as dedicated campaigns to disrupt our democratic processes. There had been awful campaigns to champion terrible right-to-work legislation that was anti-union, anti-worker, anti-American, and has no place here in Missouri or nationwide. And so I started, we didn't have a big group of people like we do today. It was a smaller crowd. It was just like the living rooms that I went to in Eldon, where I wouldn't even know everybody's name who would be there. Is that okay? Because not everybody was comfortable letting their community know that they were meeting in that living room. And so I've seen these small little groups grow and get bigger and bigger until we have a record-breaking crowd here tonight, which is incredible. And it shows that the power of bringing the community together and working together to build hope. And so that is what we have done with this campaign. So just to tell you a little bit about my values, I believe that our water, I believe every single person here deserves freedom. Okay? We deserve the freedom to make decisions about our body and our health care, whether we're a young girl or an old man. We should have the freedom to make those decisions about what happens to our bodies without a politician getting in the way or a big corporation milking us for so much money at the end of our lives that we have to think about putting our house into a second or third refinance to be able to make ends meet. I talked to Randall. He's a guy who is a Korean vet who lives up in Wentzville, and he tells me that every month he does a sick kind of Russian roulette when he gets his check. He's on a fixed income. He's not getting anything that's keeping up with inflation. So he's got to think about every month, which one of these 3 things am I going to pay for? Am I going to pay for rent this month? Am I going to pay for my utility bill, or am I going to pay for my insulin? And it's cruel and sick that we have allowed our politicians to be able to treat our workers here so poorly when we have social contracts that say otherwise. Because Medicare, Social Security, those aren't entitlement programs. Or they're not just entitlement programs, they are earned benefits that we have paid into, and we deserve to be able to take care of our seniors and those in our communities who don't have a rich daddy to pay for everything with dignity and respect. I also believe that we should have the freedom to organize our labor, to fight for safer job sites, and to make sure that the corporations that are employing us, especially the ultra-wealthy ones, that they are paying their fair share in taxes and sharing some of the cost burden that's hitting our families the most. One of my very first priorities when I get to Washington, D.C., and I've come to this perspective after talking to my union brothers, is that we need to pass the PRO Act. Because every American should be able to do what our heroes over at UAW 2250 in Wentzville have done, and our friends over at IAM over in Boeing who went on strike to defend their right to safe job sites and to higher wages. And we should be so thankful that they were able to set the example, because that's what we should be able to do too. There shouldn't be classes that are excluded from unionization. When the people decide that they want to vote on something, when they want their rights, they should be able to have that. So the PRO Act is one of the top priorities for me, because it all comes down to how we're treating our workforce and our labor. I believe that we also should have the freedom to have our children enrolled in equitably funded public education. That if you are American, you should have access to education regardless of your zip code or whose pension your dad paid into or any of that. In Missouri, we're not guaranteed kindergarten here. And with cuts that we're seeing, freezes in property taxes, tax hikes at the state level, and then a war that's costing over $1 billion a day that's unconstitutional and illegal in my opinion. We're looking at a situation where our schools are not going to have what they need to do the very basics. I have a child who has special needs. He needs his early child care center for some of his therapies. His brother couldn't get into the same program because they had given all of the slots in the public pre-K to the for-profit daycare centers in the area, and they get those registration slots. And so again, we're setting up systems where people who have wealth and who are wealthy are doing a lot better than people who are actually doing most of the contributing to the economy. And it's just not right. So every American, whether it's pre-K, and I do believe that we can make universal pre-K a thing, and we don't have to just wait for the state to figure it out, because we're in Missouri, we know how long it takes a state to figure something out, right? We're still waiting for all that money from the 80s to trickle down to us. But regardless of where you live, whether it's pre-K all the way to secondary schooling and union apprenticeship, I mean, this is America. If you want to learn, you should be able to learn, and in a public library that has lots and lots of books. And finally, we deserve to breathe clean air, drink clean water, and leave something better for our kids. And when I hear stories about these water guzzling data centers rolling through rural parts of our state, when I hear about long-standing agreements being broken by a big utility allowing them to bulldoze through farmland and hunting and fishing land that you have here in Callaway, that's not okay. We have 80% of kids here in Missouri test positive for lead. And it's not just the lead mining, it's that we have this old, outdated infrastructure. And our leaders are so busy, like Congressman allergist who took away your health care, Bob Onder. He's too busy talking about all these big social issues when really he could just stick to something boring like infrastructure and do a lot of good for a lot of people. But it's more important for his corporate donors that he fights those culture wars. We have solutions to some of these problems. All of our kids don't have to test positive for lead. And it requires people who can bring people together, work out solutions, and this is where some of my experience comes into play. We can rebuild our water infrastructure here. We actually had a really good plan for it. It was called that Heartland Energy Project, and it's been co-opted by the Doge Bros in this administration, and that has led the way to some of the data center and mining operations that you see pushing through our area with a lot of force. The Heartland Energy Project, it was supposed to update broadband because we need access to broadband, safe internet, not data center stuff. That was also going to build up rural infrastructure, roads and bridges and dams that farmers and all you guys need to go from one part of this county to the next. And that was supposed to be the hand up that farmers were looking for, right? Farmers don't want a hand out. They just want representatives who are going to show up, do their jobs, and fight for trade agreements that are going to make sure that our communities are ahead. We're not going to bail out Argentina. We need to make sure that our farmers here are getting the most money for their crops, that they have trade agreements that use those resources intelligently. And they also want to fix their own farm equipment without having to go through a big corporation to do it. So they should have the right to repair their equipment as well. So Oh yeah, that's a great point because as we've been talking, there's a lot on the ballot. There's an election tomorrow. I want to make sure everybody goes out and votes. If there is a property tax freeze, vote it away. Say no way, because when they're freezing property taxes, when at your municipal level, when they're increasing taxes at the state level on services and goods. And we have a $1 billion a day war going on overseas. It means that prices are going to go up significantly here. We've already been warned about supply chain disruptions from everything from oil to fertilizer. These data center builds are also threatening our global chip supply as well. And our soldiers deserve so much better than the leadership that is sending them into kill boxes right now. And I don't say this lightly because I would like to believe that the commander-in-chief of our own military is acting in the best interests of our Americans who are serving overseas. There are kids here who are going to go fight those wars. They've already talked about Barron getting a deferment because he's either too tall or he has some sort of mental illness that they're not going to disclose. But what they're doing is wrong. We have Vladimir Putin, who we know has put bounties on American soldiers when they were fighting in Afghanistan. He has bounties on them now in Iran. And our president just can't stop tripping over himself to bow down to him. And that's shameful. As the daughter of a man who fought in World War II in the European stage, I know the importance of our NATO alliances and how when we line up with authoritarians and dictators, that we are not more safe, we are in danger. And our boys overseas, our men overseas, men and women overseas, they're in danger when you have a president who, first off, has not disclosed his reasons for going to war. He has not sought congressional authority. He's crazy. And Gracia says he's crazy. And they're also doing something really shameful, which is not properly reporting deaths and casualties and injuries to CENTCOM properly. So we went from a day where we thought we had 13 deaths of American soldiers to over 220 deaths of American soldiers. Thousands, I think the number's up to 5,000 injured. And we don't know that those numbers are accurate, and that is extremely disturbing. We need transparency accountability, and because he is enlisted and American soldiers have died in an illegal war, he should be impeached, removed, and prosecuted. And so what we are seeing is a continuation of war crimes. And I just also want to make sure that we as Americans are recognizing and speaking out against this, because I know not everyone voted for this. Some people did, and everybody comes to their own understanding and comes back to the path in their own time. But those of us who do have the opportunity to speak up and out against this, we should. Our war was started by an act of war. They bombed a girls' school. Now, I don't care if the girls who went to the school were children of the politicians. That's one of the 40 stories they've told us, right? It doesn't matter. We have a Geneva Convention. We have international laws that dictate engagement. It's to keep us all safe. We're all fighting with the same battlefield, same kind of rules. And when we violate those agreements on such an atrocious level, he's putting us in danger. He is abdicating his fiduciary duties to protect our taxpayer money, because there's going to be restitution for the damage that they have caused. And we're going to pay for that. Not his sons, not his kids, not the CEO's daughter. It's going to be us. They send our poor kids, farm kids, to fight, and then they abandon them when they come here, and it's wrong. My dad was an Air Force vet. He served over in Dover, and the casualties, it hits me in a certain way, because my dad, when he was stationed out in Dover, his job was to create that mainframe. This is back when a computer was a building at the University of Illinois. But his job was to build the program that kept the information of all of the soldiers who were killed in Vietnam. And that always stuck with him in ways that were very significant, and it impacted his mental health for many, many years. And my dad, he served his country with everything that he had. And he still died waiting for a bed at the VA. And the reason that this happens is we have an entire class of politicians who have forgotten exactly who they serve. And so I just want to encourage you. I know that we're looking at a lot of heavy stuff in the news, and we've covered a lot of heavy topics, but I want to leave you guys with a little bit of hope, because even in our darkest days, we have moments like this where we have all of you wonderful people who have come together in a place where there were at first just a few, and now there are many. And with that kind of momentum, that's how we win elections. And let me tell you guys, when I started running, I knew it wasn't, and I talked to Brian about this. If I'm running, I know that there's not a chance I'm going to get into Congress on my first shot at it. I'm dealing with an incumbent. This is the long game. I started running in 2022. We have almost gained almost 20 points on the seat. We were able to run the best Democratic campaign right here in Missouri's 3rd Congressional District in the entire Midwest. We turned St. Charles County more blue than the first time it had been since 1960. Yes. I got 40,000 more votes than the last Dem who won this area back in 2008. And we are building momentum in a ground game that can win, regardless of whether they cut the new MAGA district that's illegal or the older district that was a little illegal. We can beat Bob on any map. And here's how. Because of your investment in my campaign and in this region, it allowed me to go back, run a good campaign, and bring on more resources. So I have Bernie Sanders' political director on my campaign team now out in Nevada. Their team specializes in flipping seats from red to blue in places where nobody expected. They were responsible for flipping Pelotola's seat up north and many seats down in the south. And when that senator down in Florida won his election here just a week or so ago, he was hanging out in the same little corner of Florida that I was hanging out in 5 weeks before. And let me tell you, from all over the country, people are flipping from red to blue. And it's because people are finding their conscience, but most of all, they're finding their neighbors. When we started the No Kings rally out in St. Peters, Missouri, we first had 40 people show up, and it was a bunch of moms. And we knew that we said, hey, this is a pretty good turnout for an overpass and O'Fallon. So you bring some friends, we need more snacks. And then the next No Kings rally, we had 200. A couple months later, we had 2,600. And at this last No Kings rally in St. Peters, Missouri, right by Mid Rivers Mall Drive, we had over 4,600 people show up. And now we have data back. Now we have data back that shows us, if you look at all the people who gave through the FEC's, you can look FEC reports, everybody who gave to Democratic campaigns in St. Charles County, there is a sea of blue. And we have enough data back that we believe that we have turned St. Charles County blue. And with this new map that they want to give away to Trump, they've given us more of blue Boone County as well. So we believe that we will beat Bob on any map. And that's even before he opens his mouth or sends out one of his surveys. And so we only need about 50,000 more votes in the district to make it happen. And with your investment, we can. And so this is where I have to make a little bit of the altar call. I need to ask you for money. It's a necessary evil in this campaign, but it is so that I learn how to go and ask for money for you when I get to DC. And so I know there is someone out here who can write me that max donation check of $3,500. But I know a lot of you have that grandpa cash too, so if you've got $20 or $40 to throw my way, I've got an envelope, and I could use your donation to power this campaign. I've got envelopes right here, and I'll be running around with an envelope in my hand if you want to put an envelope in my hand too. But my bigger donors are looking at my smaller ones to make sure that I've got the grassroots support to win. And we're going to win this together. And that is so much of my campaign, is bringing Missourians together. Because I've seen the magic that happens in rooms like this, when we all come together and we go into our own communities, and then we grow some more. And that's the magic. And that we're going to need that, especially as we come into these harder times with the economy that is struggling now, and we suspect the bottom is going to fall out. So we need brave leaders to be in critical places. With your investment, I want to open up a Bethany Mann for Congress office in every county in our district, and the reason being, we need an eye on their shenanigans, right? We need an eye on their shenanigans. We need a place for people to congregate, and we want our offices to serve as mutual aid for when communities need help the most. And that is put in the service, back in public service, when you have a bunch of billionaires who are running the table with their bought-out congressmen and politicians who are more concerned with enriching themselves than releasing the Epstein files and holding on to their power. It's time for a change. So with your help, we can do that, because Missouri, when we come together, we've seen incredible things happen. We have successfully fought against right to work in this state. We passed earned sick leave, and we're fighting for safer job sites. We put a constitutional amendment, the first in the country, to protect our access to health care here in this state. And despite our representatives overturning everything, whether it's right to work or puppy mills, we have the power to let those politicians know that when they are not serving the needs of we the people, that they're just going to have to go get a job somewhere else. And so I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you, Gracia. And I have to say, it is very special to be here with this record-breaking crowd you were the very first Speaker of the House in Missouri, weren't you? Floor leader. But you can call me Speaker. I knew it was something important, but it was a time when women were not encouraged to speak up, and you probably had to experience your share of, of bullshit. Speaking up. You. And so I'm thankful. I'm here because people like Gracia serve. And I'm here so that our young Democrats over there can step up and serve in my place too, because I'm looking at a whole big room of leaders here, and I'm thankful for all of you. With that, I'll start talking so you guys can go hear Will speak. So, thank you, Bruce. Thank you.